Today, I am going to talk about the continental drift and continue with the last class on supercontinents. How the continental plates were drifted. It has been proposed by several geologists, and the hypotheses have been rejected and also been approved based on the evolution of the several available evidences. Continental drift is a theory that the Earth's continents have moved over geologic time relative to each other, thus appearing to have drifted across the ocean bed. The continental mass it's just one fourth of the Earth's surface. It's which has been drifted on the, the oceanic surface. There are several hypotheses have been proposed with respect to drift. The first one, the continents might have drifted, was first put forward by Abraham Hoteliers. He was a cartographer and he drew the first map to the world in 1596. But the concept is independently and more fully developed by Alfred Wegener in 1912. We are going to talk about the Alfred Wegener a little bit elaborately because he was the one proposed the continental drift hypothesis. Based upon his field explorations and expeditions, he found there are the classic findings from different continents to conclude that continent were drifted. He did his PhD in University of Berlin, Germany, on astronomy. Later to his PhD, he joined the Danish government for the Greenland expeditions. During that period, it observed the aerodynamics of the polar wind pattern. Eventually, that made him to publish a book titled The Thermodynamics of the Atmosphere in 1911. In continue to that, the later period, based upon its several findings with respect to the continental part, it presented a paper, a meeting held at Geographic Society of Germany at Frankfurt in 1912. It proposed the continental replacement, where he had proposed the continental drift hypothesis. But it was not largely accepted. Then he would like to provide the more data and evidences to prove his hypothesis. Later in 1915, he put forth all his findings in a textbook called Origin of Continents and Oceans. He was a great balloonist and aid rockets to the atmosphere to see the wind dynamics. Later, he did a lot of meteorological research in the North Pole to understand the polar air dynamics. With respect to the thermodynamics of the atmosphere, what he had proposed in its textbook, it was published in 1911, it divided the atmosphere into three. One is zone of geocoronium, zone of hydrogen, and zone of nitrogen. When he was actually proposing related to the continents in a couple of meetings, but in both the meetings, since he is from German, he was ignored or rejected by the geologist from British as well as from America. What did you say the continents move? Because everyone were perplexed to accept the new vision, like the new observation with respect to the continental mass. One couldn't imagine that how it would be possible, how the continents could move. Fail to accept his hypothesis. But when I actually put all the entire its scenario to find or conclude such hypothesis, it's based upon several its field work as well as the findings from different continents. When he was in Arctic, as you see in that cartoon, this is a tropical plant bow, but this is the Arctic. How would it be possible? The presence of the tropical plant found in Arctic. The same way, when he was in South America, he found the rock assemblages that he had seen in Africa. How would it be possible? The rock type which is present in Africa also been found in South America. The fossils of South America, again it's found in Africa. So, which made him to think at his own workbench to articulate the hypothesis with respect to the continental drift. When he takes forward to the forum, to the meeting, to propose that hypothesis, it was greatly rejected. After his death, but it was later, but the same group of geologists as well as the physicists, geophysicists, but greatly near the acceptance of the continental drift hypothesis. Yes, when you propose the Earth's continents look like they could all fit together perfectly, according to him. That's why the findings related to the fossils as well as the related to the rock assemblages is an example of the Appalachian rock present in North America as well as in Europe and north um, western northwestern Africa, and also the fossils of Glossopteris found in the different continents, made him to strongly conclude that the continental plates were together once upon a time, dated back in a geological time. So he was still in finding the more evidences to conclude his hypothesis very strongly. One of his articles published in the London News that actually tells about that Earth as a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, exactly. The Africa continent itself, if you take it as a puzzle piece, you can probably fix it at the eastern part of North America as well as the eastern part of South America, where it could go and fit. You can play with it. So, exactly with respect to South America and Africa, it goes under the fit of the continents. It could exactly fit because Africa and South America drift was the recent drift in geological time compared to Antarctica, India, and Australia. So, the continental displacement, the continental drift, what he had presented a paper related to that in German Geological Society held at Frankfurt in January 6, 1912, was greatly rejected within his own community. But all his findings were quoted, put in its own textbook on the origin of continents and oceans, as I mentioned before. The last expedition, why I am saying last, that was a last expeditions before his death. During that expedition, along with the Welsman, the Greenland, due to the very bad weather and the communications were connected between the camp and the field, both the expeditors had died. 3 months later, only they could recover the Wegener's body, but not even they couldn't find the other man's body. Before his acceptance of his hypothesis, he couldn't see whether continental drift hypothesis has been accepted or approved by many of the research community. With respect to the continental drift, the great biogeographer, a great voyager, parallel to Charles Darwin, Charles Darwin, who made the voyage to American continents. The same way, Alfred Russel Wallace made his own voyage to South Asia and Southeast Asia, where still you will find the Wallace line which has been formed between the Southeast Asian countries. He says that it was formerly a very general belief, even amongst geologists, that the great features of the Earth's surface, no less than the smaller ones, were subject to continual mutations, and that during the course of known geological time, the continents and great oceans had again and again changed places with each other. It's a very general statement based upon his understanding. By traveling across the continents, he could make this quite. What actually the continental drift? We know two major landmasses on this Earth's surface. One is ocean, the another one is land, terrestrial and ocean, ocean system. Many geologists say the volcanic eruption is a strong geological event which makes the drift in both the land masses. When it occurs in the oceanic surface, which makes the divergent plate boundary as well as the convergent plate boundary to give the new birth to the oceanic highlands. The same way, when it occurs in the landmass, which is facilitated for the orogeny of the newer mountains, orogeny of the newer mountains. What we could see on the Earth's surface is the oceanic crust as well as the continental crust. But the same way, when it has been formed on the oceanic surface, it is only accelerating just at the upper surface of the ocean. So still any landmass which has been formed on the oceanic surface, still it can float, still it can move. That was the assumptions and also the observations been made by several geologists that still the earth plate which is on the oceanic surface, oceanic crust can move. Probably I would like to show how the continental drift occurred since the Pangea breakup had started. It's back to 200 million years ago, where the start of the breakup of Pangea started until it reached the present day. This is how, probably I will show once again, how the continental split, even both in Laurasia as well as in Gondwana, have been carried out. The continental have been settled down to the poles as well as to the east and west region of the earth. It took nearly 200 million years, starting of the breakup to the settlement of the present day world. Present day world. It has undergone the different period in geological time. This was the first, I would say, this was the first known modern atlas which was created by Abraham Ortelius, the cartographer, made based upon the available information. You could see how the South America has been shaped here because basically it's a cartographer. Whatever the available data exists, so you could make and draw the world map. This was the first modern created. So with respect to the continental drift hypothesis, what are the evidences which actually proves this particular hypothesis? Whether actually all these continental masses undergone the drift or not. Later in 1950, after the Second World War, there are this certain geographical areas being emerged, which is paleomagnetism, plate tectonics with respect to the study of the rocks and magnetic field of the rocks, and archival of the material with respect to the paleomagnetism and the movements of the tectonic plates, all has been largely discussed later to 1950. But what are the evidences that will corroborate with the continental drift hypothesis? I would like to show four different aspects of the evidences that proves the continental drift. Presence of the ancient rocks, the different continents, fit of continents based upon the physical structure, and presence of the coal beds across the continental mass, presence of the fossils of both flora and fauna in the, from different continents. The first one, the old red stones. This has been dated back to 400 million years ago, where during that period, Pangaea been formed. Pangaea, the supercontinent, the age of the planet, 480 million years ago. During that period, 400 million years ago, the continents were together. That period, you will find the old red stones. The presence of the old red stones shares the boundary of North America, Eurasia, as well as the northwestern part of Africa. The present day Appalachian Mountains and Caledonian Mountains, which possess the red stones that indicate that they were together once upon a time in a geological. There are several rock assemblages matching the ancient rock assemblages matching their presence and with respect to their old age. They indicate that they were there together in a geological time. The one classic example is the presence of Appalachian Mountain in North America. The same rock type and the mountainous range also present in Scandinavia, the Europe, and also the British Isles, where the Caledonian Mountains and the British Isles also possess the Appalachian Mountains. Not only that, in the northernmost part of Africa, which is the Atlas Mountains, also is the example of the Appalachian Mountains that indicate that these regions were there together in geological time back to nearly around 400 million years. The next one is the fit of continents. It is what we have seen in the previous slides. The fit of continents, it's like a puzzle piece. We could fix it up based upon the physical structure. The South America, the Eastern South America, exactly it goes and matches with the Western Africa. The rift between South America and Africa, it's favored by the invasion of the Atlantic Ocean. The trench been formed between the Africa and South America that facilitated the breakup of these two continents into these two continents. The invasion of Atlantic Ocean and the establishment of the Atlantic Ocean between these two continents, not only between these two continents and also between the South America and Europe, it's largely facilitated the splitting of the New World and the Old World. How one can actually hypothesize to fit these two, especially these two continents. This work was done by Sam Carey in 1958. That is, you can use it based upon your assumption, whether it's a shoreline fit or the physical orientation or the continental sloped orientation, the whichever form you could try to fit them with respect to them, because we have got the jigsaw puzzles in your hand. You try to match them based upon their fitness. So that's how this could be easily done, because this split was very recent in geological time from the Gondwana. Not only that, there are availability of several um, material, the paleo material, I would say paleontological material, that also indicates that South America and Africa were together. This reptilian taxa, Mesosaurus, it's dated back to 250 million years ago. How it would be possible the reptilian cross the ocean if they were there separate? So, based upon the age that indicate that this land were together, then they shared the habitat which was intact. So in later stage they got separated They've been carried away as the plate moved apart. So this is one of the best example to show that South America was split from Africa long. The distribution of ice, especially in Gondwanian land, that also gives the notion to make it in a direction that they were there together, especially these four different continents. You can't imagine that India was there in ice age because the present day climate factors not even makes us to think that India was there in a ice age. Even the same thing, Africa. You can't imagine that the tropical Africa was there in ice age. But we were there together, close to Antarctica, sharing the glacier split 300 million years ago. So as the splitted plates moved from the position to the equatorial or north, either west or east. So geographically, they moved from the south to position of the present day. So they lost their weather, they lost the paleoclimates, they've been settled to the present day. Period from America, Pennsylvanian, as well as Mississippian Carboniferous period that exactly matches the age in geological time with the Arabian Desert. The another hypothesis which has been quoted by the Alfred Wegener with respect to the split of Laurasia and Gondwana. The Tethys Sea, the formation of Tethys Sea between Laurasia and Gondwana made them into two different landmass, and that actually made and been that is the oldest the oldest and shallow tropical sea that facilitated them in facilitated the drift into two, which is Laurasia and Gondwana. We will also see in the recent news that the sediments in the few of the subduct and the switches of few of the continental plate, where you will tend to have the sediments of the Tethys Sea, and the fossilized material of the Tethys Sea have been collected very recently in the form of fossils from certain sutured mountains. The one example is the formation of Himalaya. It carried the Indian plate carried the Tethys Sea and subducted with the Eurasian plate. So you tend to have the fossils at the mountainous peaks of Himalaya. That is one classical example that indicates the presence of the Tethys Sea between Gondwana. The next evidence to prove continental drift hypothesis have come from the fossil records of the uh, fauna and flora. The continental drift between South America and Africa been indicated by the presence of the extinct fossils of Mesosaurus. The freshwater reptilia only found from these two different continents. How it would be possible if the continents were apart? They would have shared the habitat when they were together, probably, because crossing the Atlantic Ocean as being an oceanic barrier wouldn't be possible for them to establish their distributional territory. So that the extinct fossils indicate that they were there together millennia back. Likewise, the Cyanogathus and Lystrosaurus, the fossil records which have been found from different continents, also indicate the continental drift hypothesis. The another fossil record, the vegetational fossil record, the fern tree Glossopteris, also been found from all the continental pieces of the Gondwanian land. Even that indicates that These continental mass were together about 250 million years ago. The Glossopteris, it belongs to the Jurassic period, which favored the large vegetational mass and the herbivore, and also they facilitate the as a primary producer for the Jurassic animals like Saurus and Aladrosaurus. So these fossil records from both from fauna and flora indicate that the Gondwanian land was started breaking up about 200 million years ago. Example is the flightless bird, Ratite birds. The species belongs to this particular family which has been found, and the extinct taxa been found in all these three continents: South America, Africa, Australia. And also the another species kiwi, which is flightless birds, also been found extended to New Zealand. So how would it be possible? The flight nature, behavior is absent. So it's very difficult for them to cross the oceanic barrier. If you say that it has undergone the dispersal, would it be possible? So it is probably the fossils that indicate that they have been carried by the continental drift movements, tectonic plate movements. The rhea from South America, ostrich from Africa, cassowary from Papua New Guinea, emu from Australia, and kiwi from New Zealand, the extant taxa of the ratite birds that indicate that they have been originated from the ancestral ratite fossils, ratite taxa. They would have been carried along with the plate tectonic movements. That evident based upon the DNA data says that where they have come from based upon the molecular dating. Another example is the camel. We know that the Arabian desert is a native for the camel species. You will also find in Saharan desert. So the other species of the same family, Bactrian camel, which is being found in the cold desert of Tibetan Plateau and Mongolian desert. Mongolia and Tibet are the cold desert. Sahara and Arabia are very hot desert. So two different niche, but the species exist. The another species which belongs to the same family, which is llama from South America in the Patagonian Plateau, Mount Andes. How would it be possible if the continents were apart? How the particular llama of dispersed belongs to the same family, originated from the same group, or have dispersed to South America? So the original ancestor of the camel family would have found from North America, probably radiated from North America to the Africa or North, South America. But how it would be possible? Because the fossil record indicate that the original ancestors from North America. Then the extant taxa of camel, dromedary camel as well as Bactrian camel from Asia and Africa respectively, how it had been dispersed? Question. So only they have shared the habitat when they were together. So the continental mass were together, they would have shared the habitat, and they have been carried away by the. So having all these evidences, later of Alfred Wegener's death, he couldn't provide the more evidences to know prove his hypothesis, but which very clearly indicates is the breakup had started around 225 million years ago. Then later, and the drift has been carried out very gradually. 135 million years ago, it's departed completely, and I would see there in the picture, in the second picture, India is almost departed from Africa. Antarctica and Australia were there together in 65 million years ago. Still, the India, it's getting away from Africa, depended away from Africa, and going close to Asia for the subduction. Then today, the present, you will find that Antarctica plate got settled at South Pole, extreme South Pole, and the Indo-Australian plate is moved towards east, and South America is moved toward west from Africa. So the evidences that exactly concordant with what the Wegener is proposed. So all the evidences now, it is exactly proves the continental drift hypothesis, that they were there together, the supercontinent been formed, and then later it's drifted into different pieces. The pieces now got settled into 7 different continents and the smaller micro highlands. So having all these evidences that supports the continental drift hypothesis of Wegener, the fit of continents, especially South America and Africa, the at the ancient rock, the presence of the ancient rock, which in the disparate latitudes, that also indicates that they were there together. The rock assemblage, ancient rock assemblages, and its characteristics from different continents, that also indicates the um, indicates the uh, continental indicate the continental presence, indicate the supercontinental behavior, and also the distribution of the vegetation as well as the animal fossils. The basic question, how did they cross the oceans if they are apart, if they are segregated like today? Wouldn't it be possible that indicate that the date and the drift is exactly synchronized with the continental drift hypothesis? So this is how the continental drift has been facilitated, and it has been proved. Later, there are several studies with respect to plants and animals on physiographical features, and also the paleoclimatic conditions have proved the continental drift hypothesis. Thank you for watching. Kindly share and subscribe.